right, guys, and we are back again. How y'all doing this afternoon? Are you guys enjoying this takeover? Are you learning something new? Are you finding out some things that you didn't know before? Do you have any questions? There's still time for you to submit your questions, and I can answer them for you live on the Insta stories. I hope that you guys are having a good time. I know that I am. So let's just get right into the last topic that I wanted to chat with you guys about as we near the end of this absolutely amazing afternoon. So what I wanted to share with you guys this time around is just a little bit about my experience as a 2020 fellow with the ADA 25 Advancing Leadership Institute, and speak a little bit to how that has actually helped me grow stronger and more engaging in my advocacy. So really quickly, just to talk to you a little bit about what the ADA 25 Leadership Institute does, is that it works with leaders in Chicago of disability. It works with the civil community here to place persons with disabilities in places of leadership and power and influence within the Chicago area. Things like having them to sit on nonprofit boards and public commissions to make sure that the needs of the disability communities are addressed. And they also work to help the fellows like myself increase their civil engagement in the city, and also learn how to take their advocacy to levels on the city level, the state level, and sometimes even on the federal level with regard to incorporating legislation that can help to benefit the disabled communities as well. And so when I first was invited to join the Leadership Institute, I gotta be honest, I was actually a little bit hesitant because although endometriosis is a chronic illness and there are significant limitations that can be put upon you physically by the disease, I still, in my mind, did not consider myself as having a disability, right? But then when I looked up the definition of disability as defined by the ADA, which says, disability is defined as an impairment, which can be physical or mental, that substantially limits one or more major life activities. In the broadest definition of the word, it can include different forms of mental health, intellectual and developmental disabilities, learning, blind and low vision, deaf and hearing loss, mobility disabilities, and chronic illness. Hello. Endometriosis is a chronic illness. And so upon seeing that definition, I was like, well, yeah, that would be me. And as I've been working my way through the program this year, it also opened my eyes to the fact that as welcoming and inclusive and progressive as I thought that I was being in my advocacy, I was actually being exclusionary to a lot of other communities, including persons in the disability community. And so just things that you don't think about in your day-to-day life, and realizing that that was perpetrating ableism, which is to think about things and act in ways that are only from the perspective of an able person. And so what does that mean? So like even in putting together my expos, right, when scouting locations, I wasn't checking to see if those locations were wheelchair accessible. I didn't think about having interpreters on hand for persons who may be sight or hearing impaired. I didn't think about having closed captioning for persons to read, or having talk apps. I'm sorry, y'all, it's a fly in here and it's throwing me off. But I didn't think about having apps to convert um, to talk captioning for those who might be sight impaired. And so that's one of the things that being in the program has helped me to learn. Another big thing that I've learned is the inclusion of intersectionality within my outreach efforts. And so before coming into the program, intersectionality was really just a buzzword that I had been hearing maybe for about a year or two prior, but I really didn't understand what the concept of intersectionality meant. And so being in the program, helped me to understand that intersectionality, as defined by Webster's Dictionary, talks about the complex and cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, and classism, combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized individuals or groups. Intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw to articulate the overlapping experiences of race and gender. It has since come to also include experiences between any kind of discrimination, including gender, race, class, socioeconomic status, physical or mental disability, gender or sexual identity, religion, or ethnicity. And so, why does that matter as an advocate? One of the glaring things that it taught me in my advocacy, specifically with endometriosis, is a lot of the language that we use, right? Early on in my advocacy and in my learning, you would hear the term like endo sister used a lot. And the fact of the matter is, when we talk about endometriosis, it is a disease that inherently occurs outside of the uterus, right? But in a grand majority of the imagery that you see pictorials of a uterus, right? We know that endometriosis can occur in any organ in the body, right? So although in historically smaller numbers, men can be affected with endometriosis. There's also language sometimes in the communities that say, no uterus, no voice, meaning that, men can't typically speak to endometriosis. Well, again, men can have endometriosis. And number two, I am a person without a uterus due to hysterectomy for adenomyosis. And so does that now mean because I don't have a uterus, I no longer have a voice? Right? We also need to take into consideration trans women and trans men who have been affected by the disease. Up until 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, it was brought to my attention about the challenges that same-sex couples face when battling endometriosis, right? And before being in the Institute, none of those things had really occurred to me. And so now, as an advocate, I'm learning to be more inclusive in dealing with the language that I use when I talk about endometriosis, the people affected by endometriosis when I'm talking, taking into consideration that there are non-binary people who are just as affected. And my job as an advocate, regardless of who you are or what you look like or how you identify, if you have a diagnosis of endometriosis, my job is to help support you in the best way that I can. Another area, going back to closed captioning, working with the Chronic Disease Coalition for this takeover, I talked to them about making sure that the videos I used today included closed captioning. And that is something that they're going to take going forward to make sure that the videos that they use, that they put out, have closed captioning. I'm also working on changing the narrative of my language. And it's hard. I've been doing it for almost 10 years. And so sometimes I'll still, do it subconsciously, but moving away from only using the term endo sister. And so now I try to use words like endo bestie or endo warrior or like my endo fam or my endo peeps, right? To be more inclusive and understand that there's a broader spectrum of what we think or who we think is affected in the endometriosis and the chronic illness communities. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys. So hopefully if those are things that you're not doing, those are some of the things that you can start to incorporate in your advocacy. Again, going back to the earlier discussion, if we are a global family, right? If we are a global community, if all of the lives matter, then we have to be mindful to make accommodations for all people and all identities when we are serving the communities that we serve. And so those are just a few things that I've learned in being in the Leadership Institute. And so I'm looking forward to learning more in the rest of the year and bringing more to my advocacy and taking my advocacy to greater heights. And so that wraps up. We're kind of coming to the end of the day here with the takeover. So what do you guys think? Drop down in the comments, in the stories. I would love to have your feedback. This has been an absolutely amazing day for me. I hope you guys have been following. If you haven't already, please head on over to my Instagram page at Fight Fierce Endo. Follow me, DM me. I love to keep this conversation going. If you guys are on Facebook, I'm at Facebook at Fighting Fiercely. I'm also on Twitter at Fight Fierce Endo as well. You guys can also look me up, Fighting Fiercely, on YouTube and check out the dozens of informational and educational videos that I have there about endometriosis and adenomyosis. And I've got some fun videos over there as well. If you want to learn more about my Fighting Fiercely movement or to grab you a copy of Fighting Fiercely, Unveiling the Unknown About Endometriosis, you can do so at www.fightingfiercely.com. Thank you so very much, guys. This has been an absolute blast. I've really enjoyed this. I can't wait to keep the conversation going. So until next time, be educated, be enlightened, be empowered, and most important, keep fighting.